Hey there, welcome to the Beer Garden. This is your landscape industry podcast that lasts as long as it takes to enjoy your favorite beverage. I am Jason. That's Brandon. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing good. I love that intro. I love that song. That just gets me going. I feel like a WWE guy coming out on stage, out to the ring or something.
Yeah, there you go. It's a great walkout song. It's a great
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. Do you know what your walkout song would be? If you were a boxer, wrestler, whatever it may be, UFC, what would your walkout song be?
It would be a Rage Against the Machine song, I would say.
Nice.
Yeah. That shit gets me going.
Awesome. I love it. I have one.
And you? Were you hoping I would ask?
No. I, as you know, I have dabbled in boxing, so I actually have a walkout song. I don't know that anyone's going to know what it is.
Oh,
it's called "Young Men Dead" from the Black Angels, and it's a great song. It's more of like a low key, like you're walking with your hood up as you're walking out, kind of like builds slowly, not just like everyone goes with the in your face one. Mine's more like ominous, like this guy might actually like come into the ring and like stab me sort of thing. So I like to keep people on their toes. I always thought it'd be fun to do like something completely out of left field, like Strangers in the Night or something like that. Just like something that's really kind of romantic, maybe. Just really throw them off their game. Yeah.
With some Tenacious D, maybe.
Ooh, yeah, good. So let's kick things up. Let's start at the start, as we do. And why don't you tell me what you're drinking?
Well, currently, as my pre-drink, I guess, I'm drinking a straight and narrow again. I won't cheers you with this, but I'm just informing you about it.
Okay.
It's straight and narrow. I'm a little embarrassed to even read what flavor it is, but it is a Huckleberry Fir vodka cocktail.
All right.
No reason to be embarrassed about that. I shouldn't say that. No. What I'm actually going to drink is from Half Hitch Brewing, brewed in Alberta. I'm just trying to remember by reading the can where this is in Alberta. I'm going to look that up because, it's in Cochrane, just west of Calgary. It's called Papa Bear. It's quite good, and I've had it in my fridge for some time, a few weeks. It's ready to be consumed, and I'm happy to share that with you today.
Nice. I like it.
What do you got?
I'm also I was pre-gaming as well, so I'm not going to leave you hanging because mine is in the same vein as you. My pre-game, I was drinking an Absolute cocktail, specifically the berry vodka-rita. So no judgment from my side. It's quite good, actually. It's basically like a berry vodka soda sort of thing. So
just finished about
that. Actually, we had some friends over this last weekend to watch the Las Vegas Grand Prix. As you know, I'm a big F1 fan, and I'm going to take this moment to brag, because I was clearly responsible for this. My team is Mercedes, as you also know, because you bought me a really sweet Mercedes Lego.
Did you make that? Did you build that yet?
No, I'm waiting until you're here with me and we have hours carved out to put it together.
I was there.
I know, but we were busy. Okay. Anyways, Mercedes took first and second place in the Vegas Grand Prix, so a really good weekend for us. But anyway, someone brought this and left it in my fridge, and so that's why I'm drinking it. Oh. What I will actually be drinking for our episode is from Southern Tier Brewing Company, which is interesting because they seem to be like an East Coast brewery. I was not familiar with them, but they're from New York. So Southern Tier is an interesting name. This is one of their holiday specials. It is the Chestnut Praline Imperial Ale.
That sounds kind of weird, but I'll allow it. I was just thinking about how you guys in America, you don't really name directions very well, like the Midwest or things like that. Like that's the southern, what'd you call it? A southern ale or something?
Southern Tier Brewing Company.
It's like Northeast.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're really
So much weird stuff like that I don't know
it,
where the South is. Everybody's like, I'm, the
yeah.
the South or whatever. And
That's more just a
it's
feel.
very confusing.
Like you can just guess based off like accent and general personality whether they're from the South or not. It's more a feel than a geographical location.
Okay.
And then yeah, it took me probably into my mid-20s to realize that I technically lived in the West in Colorado.
That's how long it took me to learn my months in order.
Really? Do you know that there's a little cheat for that for at least July through November? Just spell my name.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy.
Right?
It's incredible.
How about that little tidbit?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's if you don't take anything else from this episode, it's that.
That's it.
We better start talking about something valuable right away.
You want to crack
really
them really
boring.
quick? I got to open this beer. All right. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Half Hitch. That's a knot, right? That's a type of knot. Is that all that is? This is Half Hitch Brewing. Do you think that means anything different?
I think it's a knot. It's a good name.
Yeah, not bad.
Damn, this is a good beer, actually.
I was just thinking that about mine.
Nice.
Okay, so today we are talking about something that took me quite a long time compared to everything else. How to take estimating and sales off of your plate as an owner. So we'll get to talk about why that's generally difficult, struggles with that, things like how to document and systemize your estimating, building a consistent sales process, setting goals and expectations for your team, training and mentorship. I think I have a few good kind of easy to use, like easy to put into place things for that. And then just maintaining accountability and performance ongoing afterwards. So should be lots of good stuff here. Want to get right into it?
Yeah, I'll just really quick throw out that I think like a little bit of the why behind this. Like obviously, if you're of a certain size, maybe this doesn't make sense to do early on. But as you start to shed things, I don't know what it was for you, but for me, it was like the first major thing I shed was kind of the office tasks. It was the office manager that I hired first, like at a management level. Then it was a production manager or operations manager, whatever you like to call that in your business. And then it was really kind of diving into the sales and estimating, that sort of thing. It's generally tends to be I think one of the last things that owners take off their plate. But like at a certain size, you really do, like, it's a necessity for you to sit in that owner's role and really look forward and start thinking about like the direction of the company. There's just like a lot, especially as the machine gets bigger and it's moving quicker and quicker, that you should be spending your time on. And so
what size were you when you hired an office manager, your first person that helped you with anything admin related?
It was pretty much right after I bought the business. So it was like
just immediately.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know how to send an invoice. I got to hire somebody.
Well, keep in mind though that we do a lot of residential, like we're a high volume business. So there was a lot of like customer interactions in our business. Even with the automation, we had some automation early on, but like it became really hard because for years I was like in the field making the calls and answering the phones and doing all that prior to owning the business. And then I'd say probably like after the first year of owning the business is when I hired an office manager. So we were probably like 750,000 somewhere in there when I hired the office manager.
We were about the same. We hired I hired Michelle wasn't working with me at that time, but I hired somebody to help me about 10 hours a week. And it was one of Michelle's friends, like longtime friends from childhood, that was a stay-at-home mom, and she was like super sharp and had all this crazy skill set because she had a career going before she had her first kid. And that it's weird, but that is like there's a gold mine of talent there.
Yeah.
That they're just, people that have decided to be stay-at-home parents that had tons of education and all this work experience. And so Caroline worked with us for a good few years, part-time, and it was just a matter of saying, hey, this is what I need done, 10 hours to 15 hours kind of thing a week. You can do it anytime. So we really made it work for her, and that was a huge difference. Like, she worked 3 times faster than me at admin stuff. 8 hours of work done in like 2 hours.
That's interesting.
Me, so.
That's really similar to our office manager. So our office manager, Samantha, she's actually still our office manager today. She's the first one I hired in the role. She was very skilled and talented. She worked in a hospital for many years, dealing with like billing in a hospital, which is like one of the worst jobs I could possibly imagine. Like, someone in a hospital bed, like, okay, so this is how much you owe us. But she did that. Among other things, she had a sales role with like a big gym franchise as well prior to that. Um, and she had or was expecting her first kid, and she was looking for something that she could do working from home. And she's just really talented at that kind of admin side and customer service side, and
Totally.
she's been excellent. She's still our office manager. She's since moved to South Dakota, and she works remotely, but she's been great. And yeah, interesting that we both kind of went that route with that, like tapping into someone as they're working from home.
It was one of your bandmates from Uplug's wives, right?
Yeah, one of my best friend's wives. So Jeff was our bass player in the Epilogues, and it's his wife. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, same kind of thing for me. So anyway, let's get into it here. So I guess first question is, why do you think that owners generally, like, I find it's quite a struggle. It was for me to let go of estimating in sales. And when I talk to other business owners, it's the same thing. They just can't figure it out. And that's why we're making the episode. What are some of the reasons you think that people struggle with it so much?
There's 2 things that come to mind right out of the gates. One is just the it's like a fear, right? It's the money of your business. It's like you're setting the
it's like it's an input. Like,
yes.
So it's going to result in the output. Like, if you screw up the estimate, you take on the wrong job, and we sell like long-term contracts. Now the fear of being screwed for a long time.
Totally. That's a big one, especially in maintenance, right? Where it's like you're setting the cost for like the year. So it's like, if you do it wrong, you could really end up in a bad place. And we're all aware of underpricing things. The funny part about that, though, that I think is, like, when you really break down most owners who are still holding on to this, their estimating process that they're doing, and they're like so afraid to hand it off to someone else. Um, like, they really don't have, I know I didn't, like, a dialed way of arriving at that price. They generally tend to be ballparking it and just kind of like, throwing something at the wall. That being said, you certainly get better and better at that as time passes. But that's the second reason I think it's so hard to hand off, is it tends to be one of the less systemized parts of the business. Like, you really tend to focus, I think, on systemizing the infield stuff first, because that's what, being on the tools, that sort of thing. And it makes sense, right? Like, the more efficient the guys are in the field, the more they have processes and systems they can follow, the more profitable you'll be if you price everything right. But like, if you're just driving around looking at a property and going, yeah, I think that'll take 12 man hours, and it's going to be roughly about this, like,
and you're probably pretty close a lot of the time. Like, you have so much experience that it works. It works, and it might not be something that takes a tremendous amount of time either. So yeah, it's just something that's like you just wing it for a long time. That's what I find.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you found of why people struggle so much to let go of it?
Yeah, it's something that it's like you're really close to your customers. They're often, my world is property managers and um, like kind of repeat clients in that sense. So it's like I killed myself working hard to like build these relationships, and to hand them off is just really scary.
Yeah.
And I'm really close with these people, and I can't even imagine how it's a false like fear in a way. Um, yeah, ultimately when I did it took me to the point where it was seriously hindering growth. Like there was no way that I was going to be able to do the amount of estimates, meet with customers. I left it that long. Like there's no
Yeah.
possible way if I did nothing related to production, nothing related to anything else in the company. There's an ideal window of sales, and it would be impossible for me to do all these estimates and meet with customers and all of these things. That's how long I left it. And there was a couple of sales seasons, two in a year for us, that I hurt the growth of my company because I was just the only sales guy. And
Yeah.
so I don't recommend leaving it that long.
That's another one that I've thought about a lot too. I appreciate you sharing that. One thing I would encourage if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, is it the right time for me to do this? Look at all the other write down all of the things that you do in a given day. Ideally like during sales season, right? It's not just sales. Like, I almost guarantee it, unless you've really figured it out, you probably aren't just doing sales. You're dealing with some sort of financial, sort of urgent matter. You're dealing with some sort of customer complaint. Like, you're handling other stuff. So, I think that's an important switch to flip as you're thinking about this, from a mindset style or from a mindset standpoint, is just you're talking about adding someone who gets to spend 100% of their time just focusing on sales. And I can pretty much guarantee that you're not doing that currently. So if you can start thinking about that opportunity that's there rather than a risk, where it's just okay, so I know that I'm going to be spread then. I have all these other things I have to focus on. Um, but I'm gonna bring someone in who I can really, train up and get to, crush this sorta thing. Um, that's a huge opportunity. That person, that's all they're gonna care about, that's all they're gonna focus on, and, that's their entire job.
Yeah, yeah, and there's other ways to work sales into your roles to make them more like hybrid roles, and I think we'll get into that later in the call. You don't have to necessarily hire a full-time year-round salesperson
Totally.
in order to do it. So
Yeah.
so one of the first things is, you know, generally most business owners have been just winging it. Like, you've just been ballparking prices. You know how much it's going to cost. You know how much that property is similar to all these other properties you have, and it should be X number of dollars a season or month or whatever. And so that's what you've relied on, and you have all these years and years of experience, and now you're going to try to, you've decided you're going to try to get someone else to do this. Well, I mean, you could just get them to try and ballpark it, but you're gonna you're you're gonna lose on some for sure, and you're not gonna sleep very well at night unless you're picking through every single estimate, really attentively. So, and then when you get more people, like a couple more people doing sales, well, If you have 3 people doing estimates and all of them are coming out with vastly different numbers because they're all just ballparking prices, then that obviously hurts your business as well. So you need to find a way to systemize and standardize what you're selling, and we can get into the best ways to do that. There's a lot of different. There is a few different ways to do that as well. So why don't you take us through a little bit of that and how ACA does it, Jason?
Sure. I think the first step when it comes to like really systemizing, like right now we're just talking about the estimating process, not even like the full sales process. The first step, as you mentioned, like a lot of guys, it's just very vague right now. Step back though and think about like what the things are that you need to do in that process. So just map out like the big buckets that you have to do. Um, Even if you're just driving around the property and ballparking it, or looking at a Google Maps and ballparking it, like what you're doing there is you're gathering some sort of intel, measurements. You might not be taking actual measurements if you're just driving around and ballparking it, but that is what you're doing. You're trying to figure out like how big is the property, how complex is the property, like are there a lot of like gates we have to enter and exit to cut it? Is there like a lot of slope? Like you're just looking for like those sorts of things, right? So that's one, right? We call that discovery. That's our discovery stage in estimating. We're learning about the property, taking measurements, and we're assigning like a difficulty factor. Then the next step for us is to like, so I guess I should say like the transition that I went through was I used to be one of those guys that would ballpark it and just kind of look at things and guess, but I needed to think about how to hand this off. So I started looking at different tools and things like that that could help me with just that one part of it. Like, how can we make this discovery um, phase more streamlined and something that I could hand off to someone? And so there's a ton of tools out there. I'll just throw out really quick for that particular thing. Attentive, that's what we use for it takes aerial measurements of the property. We use that and also like go through like the street views as well to kind of look like, are there hills? Are there like what we're trying to get to know the property as much as possible. You, if you've listened to any of the previous podcasts, you know that I like really automating things and not even having to send someone to the site for that initial discovery. So we do it all remotely unless we absolutely have to go to the site. Go Ilon though is another one. I think it's called Property Intel now. I believe Aspire bought it. That's another tool, similar tool that you can use. Deeplon is a really cool tool. We've met some of the founder of Deeplon at some of the conventions that we've done. Really neat tool. I would check that one out as well. That one, actually, a lot of these actually now kind of tie into the next type of tool, is like, how do you take those measurements and apply pricing to it? A lot of these now have like that aspect of it, but first find that part. How do we gather all the measurements? How do we learn about the property? And
And
then
so those are giving you square footages. So like take me through what, the so if you have been just going to sites
Mhm.
and looking at the yard and be like, it's a pretty big yard. It's kind of like, the Joneses house, and I charge them $300 a month. So this one's got a big hill in the back, so I better do it at $320.
Right.
Um, what kind of information am I getting from something like Attentive or GoIlon or Deeplon?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for I'm I think both of us are going to be talking a lot like maintenance heavy here. Obviously, like a design build is going to be a bit different, but let's stay on the maintenance train. When you're using these tools, the outputs that you're getting from this tool is, for example, lawn square footage. So square footage of all the grass on the property. For us, we have it measure mulch bed square footage, rock or gravel bed square footage. Um, and then it's also measuring roadways for us, roadways, lots, driveways, those sorts of things, pedestrian areas, so sidewalks, those sorts of things. It's a Yeah, it's taking account of all the trees on the property as well, so we get a volume of trees. It's also measuring, like, hard edge versus soft edge, on the property, so you can get very granular.
Let's dive into that for a second, like the calculation to get a number of hours. So I'm just trying to, in case we're going to have people watching that have been just ballparking numbers, and
Mhm.
they might not understand how you would even calculate this, right? So we get back from these software products, we get square footages, we get like incredibly detailed, like creepily detailed satellite images, where you can like count how many blades of grass are on their property, and then we are calculating by what is called production rates. So that's just how many square feet per hour, typically, that you would be able to perform a service. So you're figuring out what is my hourly rate. So say your hourly rate is $80 an hour, and then you're multiplying that by how many hours it's going to take. You figure out how many hours it's going to take by your production rate, which, say, for I'm just going to make up numbers here, don't use them, but say for mowing, it's 7,500 square feet an hour. You measured a property at 15,000 square feet, so it's going to take you a couple, like two people hours to get it done. And you're doing that for spring cleanups, for mowing, for detail maintenance, gardening, for fertilizing, everything. And you're doing this like line by line by line as you go through your estimating process, and it'll give you a total amount of hours to multiply by your hourly rate, and that's times how many visits you're going to do, times and that equals ultimately your season's price, right?
Right. The other thing I would add to that really quick is just difficulty factors, right? So, like, you might say that we mow, you said 60 or 7,500 square foot per hour, right?
Mhm.
For your mow service. You That might vary if it's like very hilly or there's a lot of gates to go in and out. So we do difficulty factors as well. The thing I would recommend, and I know you and I have talked about this before, there's gonna be a desire to get really granular on this out of the gate where you're like, okay, let's figure out how much, like, what our production rate is for using a 32-inch stander, a 36-inch stander, a 52-inch standard, now trimming, now edging. Like, let's get a production rate for each of those. And it's gonna take you a very long time to do that. Not to say you can't get there over time, but even still in our business, we use one production rate for what we call cut and clean service. And that includes mowing, edging, trimming, cleaning up the gutters and blowing off and everything afterwards. We just have one production rate for that service.
One tip I'll give, because I tried to go the route of figuring out every piece of machinery, and literally to the point where we had stopwatches, right? We were out with stopwatches, timing how long it took people to shovel sidewalks, to mow grass with different types of mowers, and that's what you need to do to figure this out. But the feedback loop to refine your production rates is very important. And you're gonna start off by just kind of either kind of guesstimating, or you're going to go out with stopwatches. So what I mean by a feedback loop is you need to be tracking. It's like, if you're not tracking time, that's probably a whole separate video, but you should be tracking the time on site for your crews, right? And if I know that my crew of two people clocks into a job, trims the lawn, does the trimming, does the mowing, blows it off, picks up trash, shakes hands with the homeowner, loads the truck, and then clocks out. I only have data showing when they clocked in to do all of those tasks and out of all of those tasks. So my production rate that I can go back in my software, my spreadsheet, and measure is based on all of those combined.
Mhm.
If I wanted to have a feedback loop on how long it took them to line trim and mow with a 21 inch in the front yard and the 36 inch in the backyard and all those things. Well, you need like a referee standing on the roof watching everybody clicking a stopwatch. Like it's in my business, it was unrealistic. Maybe you can do that somehow, but if you can't, that's, I think what Jason is saying is like, you're never going to be able to get that detailed to get a good feedback loop to always refine that production rate. And you want to be able to compare it. This is how you compare like crew performance from one crew to another to make, to make hard conversations a little more data based, to say like, hey, you guys all have, similar square footages and your crew has a much higher production rate and great quality and so on and so forth, is by being able to actually have like a solid feedback loop on what you're tracking time on. So I think a lot of people make this mistake, and I certainly did at the start, was making my production rates way too specific and not connected to real production. So I think that's a point to really hammer home.
Really good.
That horse is dead. I just beat it to death
there. Really good point, though. That's absolutely right. Like, think about what your crews are going to be able to clock in and out of, and it's generally the service as a whole, not all the individual components. Yeah, love that. So the other thing I would say with this, just to wrap up the estimating part of things, and this would be the case for all of the things we're going to talk about. Once you've kind of mapped out like the key steps of your estimation, right? Gathering all the stuff, you've got your production rates. Now you're taking the data that you got in your discovery and putting it against those production rates, and you've got your estimate. Now make sure that you are building like checklists and training around these things. And that's going to be the case for any of this. But if you're starting, like, if you're thinking that like you might get to this point in like a year or two because you're that forward thinking, unlike Brandon and myself, who took it way too far before we even started considering having anyone help us, like that's when you should be thinking about it, because you have a year or two to map this stuff out, start creating checklists, start documenting this. Like, what is an easy property versus a medium property versus a difficult property for cut and clean? How do they determine that? What are the examples of other properties that you service that are easy properties, that are medium properties, that are difficult properties? I know Brandon does that really well. He has a checklist for all of his staff to go in and see like, oh, medium property, that's like this one that we service, this one. Okay, yeah, I can compare and see. Those are all the things you're doing in your head when you drive around in a truck and you ballpark the price. You are doing all those things in your head. You just have like a decade or more of experience, and that's why you're able to do that. So like put it into a checklist and build the training around that. So, and you don't have to hand this all off right away. You can add a estimate review stage, and I would recommend that. Like when you start training someone, don't let them just start firing off quotes based off of their pricing. Just review it first and then give them feedback, and then it becomes this iterative process where they get better and you can be more comfortable handing it off.
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, I think that we could talk a bit more on sales process and kind of supporting, the supporting documents and supporting things that you give to your staff. Do you want to just give a few quick highlights on this? Like I think ACA is actually better than, you won't hear me admit this very often, but a little better, a hair better than LBN is. So wow. Yeah, what kind of
I'm touched. I'm touched.
He stole most of his ideas from me.
Yeah, it's true. No, I think, just to keep it concise here, like we talked about the estimating process. That's obviously only one part of the sales process. There's a lot more that goes into the sales process. And again, you've handled this up to this point. You've built these relationships. Well, just think of all the things that you do to sell contracts that works, and like build collateral for that. That's all you need to do, in my opinion.
Which is a
Like,
fancy word for like a flyer or something.
documents, yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's like, it starts with the proposal document itself, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. Go back and listen to that. But like, both of our proposal documents are crazy long. Like, most people would look at them and be like, that's a lot of shit, but it's like all the collateral that you need in there. And then we send that different collateral, we break it off, and we send different follow-up emails and stuff like that. Things like what makes your company unique to work with, like all the stuff that is in your sales process, your team, your processes, your systems, like all those sorts of things. Build a little one pager that highlights those things and give that to your sales team, because that'll help them immensely. Rather than having to store it up here, they just have a thing. They know, like, third touch after the proposal, I always send this one about the team. Um, that's it. The other thing I would add to that is, and this is just like my personal preference, you can automate so much of this to keep your salespeople selling. Like, follow-ups are like one of the easiest things to automate. Once the proposal is sent, you have a basic CRM, you set up an if then branch where it's like, has the proposal closed? No, it hasn't yet. They haven't made a decision. Cool. Send them this little email with this piece of collateral that shows like our team. Okay. 3 days go by. Has the proposal closed? No, it hasn't. Cool. Send them this little piece of collateral. Like, just, that's a very easy thing to automate in almost all CRMs. So, yeah, just make sure that you're doing that. Brochures, like actual physical handout things, are nice too. If your team's getting in front of people, that they can hand them and leave with them. Leave behinds is what a lot of people call that. And then all of your scripts as well. Just start building scripts for the call conversations, those sorts of things. The biggest thing I would say here is, like, make sure you set an expectation and a standard, which will kind of transition us into our next topic, but on the amount of follow-up that you deem necessary for your sales process, because generally
Right.
everyone's going to default to like way less than what they actually need. And again, we've talked about this in many other um, podcasts, but I don't remember what the fact is. Jonathan could spout it off for sure. Like, but it's like
It's like
most,
7 times or something ridiculous that you're supposed to follow up with everybody.
yeah, it's like most deals close after like the seventh or eighth follow up. Like 80% of them close after that many follow ups. It's crazy. So, yeah, those are my points. Do you have anything else?
I I don't want people to get overwhelmed. So, I mean, we're kind of we're trying to give tips to people of all company sizes and all experience here, right? So everybody from an owner operator, or like a father son type operation that has just been ballparking numbers and they're working on paper, to larger operations with CRMs and with scheduling softwares and that are good at spreadsheets and all these things. So I think the key thing here, and you'll hear me say this in multiple podcasts, is just like getting started. And the first step to it is breaking down your say your summer contract into which services it is, whether you do this on paper, in a spreadsheet, in a CRM, whatever. Break it down into services. What are you doing? You're doing spring cleanups, cuts, aerations, couple fertilizations. Like, how many visits is it? How much do you think you charge per hour? And then start line by line, just building that equation out, right? So your production rate, like, you should work on those. So it's going to take me this many hours times this many visits times this hourly rate equals this amount per season for cuts. Same equation for spring cleanup, for etc. You have a total at the bottom. That's how you start doing this, right? And then you just hand that sheet with some blanks on it to the person that you want to hand off your contract sales to, and you review it before it goes out until they're like better than you at it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the key. There's some really advanced automations and things that we can talk about for days and days, especially Jason, around yeah, if I hope you know how to fast forward parts of this. But there's some really advanced, crazy shit that ACA does to follow up with these deals and all these things. But I just don't want people to get overwhelmed and not do it. Right.
That's a fair point, and I do have a tendency to, like, go down that rabbit hole. It could be, though, as simple as when I'm talking about all these follow-up things, open up a Google Doc or Microsoft Word or whatever you're using, write 3 different emails, like, write the copy for 3 different emails, what you would send when you send the proposal, what you would send with your first follow-up, and what you would send with your next follow-up. It could be 2 to 3 sentences each email. Save
Exactly.
that and share it with the other person, and they can copy paste that into every email that they send. Like, just make
There
their
you go.
life
Yeah.
easy and make it consistent.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I really like that. I want us to. I want to make sure that we're speaking to kind of multiple levels of companies, so we can try to provide some value to everybody there.
Totally.
So in your kind of journey, how did you, so we've taught people kind of how to estimate at this point, I guess, and we've set some templates up for them to calculate things. How do they know how much they're supposed to sell, or what's, at some point you have to tell them, like, this is the expectation, get this thing out in this much time. Like, when a request comes in, is it an hour? Is it 3 days? Like, how long do I have? All of these kind of things. Are you guys fairly dialed on that?
I like to think so. Um, I I think we've gotten better at it over time, like anything else. For me, it's about, like, that's kind of actually similar to, like, the point that you just made, actually. Like, you need to communicate expectations. We like to call these deliverables or KPIs. There's no shortage of deliverables or KPIs, especially in sales, that you could dive into. Like, there could be a list of 50 of them. But, like, what I would recommend is, like, keep it simple to start. Start with the high level. I think of these as, like, these are the deliverables or accountabilities if you're talking like EOS. Like, it is revenue sold. They're like, that is their primary job. Like, you are expected to deliver X amount of revenue over the course of the year, month, whatever that timeline may be. Your role is expected to deliver that. That's your deliverable. Um, that's like their number one, right? Their primary. But then you get into, like, the kind of lead indicators, because it's like, well, you could make so many excuses about why I didn't hit my revenue. Well, what are like the actions I could take to sell that revenue? And that's where you start to get into the supporting KPIs. So one of those is close ratio. What percentage of all of the proposals that I'm sending are closing? That's just an important one to track for so many reasons. It tells you if your pricing's too high or too low. It tells you if maybe your sales efforts aren't,
What's your
like, are you,
close ratio?
I know that we're
I
somewhere
can't
in
wait.
somewhere between 35 and 40%, but let me just tell you here,
This was a test.
38%.
38. That's good. So I think it's interesting to know, like, why wouldn't you want that to be 85%, Jason? Or, like, why
Yep.
wouldn't you want it to be way higher? Or what would it tell you if it was?
If it's way higher, it would tell me that my pricing's too low. Like, that's pretty much the first thing it would tell me, is that my pricing's too low.
And it could, of
There
course, tell you other things too.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, everybody else went out of business or something, but it it it's probably, most likely, it means, like, you could raise your pricing.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing, and Jason was probably getting to this, I'm just interrupting him, is that you can really back into the numbers once you start tracking these things. So if you know that you need to sell, let's say I need to sell 100 residential contracts this spring to hit my sales goal, to fill up my crews, like, to give them enough work, I need 100 contracts sold. If my close ratio is 33%, that means I have to send 300 quotes, right? And then if you go back even further, you could say, well, how many leads come through the door? Like, how many opportunities do I get that I actually want to bid on? And if, maybe you only do single family residential and half of your leads, it's not realistic, but half your leads are commercial or something. And so you just say no to all the commercial ones. Well, then that's 50% that, are no good to you. So that
Not
means
even
you
going to
need,
get proposals.
yeah. So that means you need 600. Tell me if my math is
Leads.
wrong. I'm not that good at it, but that means you need 600 leads to send 300 quotes to win 100 jobs.
Correct.
Right.
That was
And so
impressive.
that's how you, thank you. I'm so thankful that I used 100 and not some weird number at the beginning of that. So, basically what you're doing there is you're buying yourself time kind of in a very tight sales cycle. So, in like, in the middle of winter, when you set your sales goal of 100, how much your marketing is going to have to churn out for leads for you to hit your sales goal. And then you can track like week by week, almost day by day, if you're on track or off track to hit that.
That's also how you work backwards into a marketing budget. Like I think so many people when marketing seems like oftentimes when I have conversations with other landscapers, marketing seems like this like gray box, this like unknown thing. But it's like the same, it's just an extension of that equation that you just did. You have to start collecting data and testing. But if I know generally that I have to spend $10 on marketing for every lead I bring in, which would be awesome, by the way, like $10 for every lead I bring in. Well, in your example, I know I need to spend $6,000, right? Because is that right?
Yeah.
600 leads. Okay.
Times 10. Yeah.
So 600 leads I need to generate. I have to spend $10 per lead, which would be $6,000 this sales season to generate those 600 leads. Unless I get really efficient at my marketing or I increase my close ratio, like those are the levers I can pull. And it becomes really cool. Like you can imagine yourself
That's
like
pretty not cool so far. I hope it's interesting and
you
we
can
haven't
imagine
lost
yourself
everybody by now.
like imagine yourself sitting on a beach somewhere and you're just getting all these metrics, right? Like you could see the levers that you could pull there where it's like, okay, well, we're bringing in leads at $10. We're actually closing it where we want, but we decided that we want to boost our sales this much. We can either like lower our prices, which probably not the best call, to increase more. We can spend more on marketing. Like you start to see these levers you can pull. I just think it's fun.
Yeah. And then you can coach your team along the way. So now you've passed off sales,
Right.
you're not too involved in marketing. Maybe you can kind of see the future. Like if you're early on and you're just wondering, how the hell am I ever going to pass off sales to somebody else? This is kind of how you do it. This is how you set those numbers and expectations. And early on, before you've it makes you a lot more comfortable, right? Because when you see that you don't have enough leads yet, now you can address it early rather than waiting until May 1st. And then you're like, crap, we only closed 50, closed 50 contracts. Now we have too much equipment, too many guys hired. We're not going to hit our revenue targets, so this is really an example of how you do that. So, yeah.
Just to close this section out, I would add just a couple things. First of all, other metrics I love to track are response time. That's a big one. In sales, it's all about response time. How quickly can you get to people? How quickly can you turn the proposal around? Count of follow-ups. We already mentioned that earlier. But the last thing I'll say is just like we're talking a lot about like we need 600 leads, we need this many sales, and generally you're kind of thinking in a year, right? I would highly recommend breaking that down now into smaller chunks. So quarterly, monthly, whatever, and do it for all those metrics. So if we know we need X amount of revenue in the next quarter sold, that means that we need X amount of leads. That means that we need X amount of proposals sent, like all those sorts of things, and then talk about it. That's the thing I think gets forgot about all the time. Talk about it all the time. Set a weekly sales meeting with, even if it's one person and it's just you have one salesperson, like meet with them weekly and go through how many calls did you make, how many proposals did you send, how many follow-ups did you do, how much revenue did you close? What was your close ratio? If you start doing that, it is like crazy. And I'm saying this from like Brandon just recently saw our graph of our year for this year. We were behind goal all year on our sales. And part of that was like honestly just us making mistakes early in the season. We missed our early sales season because we were dealing with reshuffling our staff around in our business. We were making some pretty major changes within our organization. And then we got to quarter three and we're like, we're so far behind goal. I don't know that we're ever going to be able to hit our sales goal for this year. And we're having to change all these things in our business. And all we started doing, the big thing that we changed was like just a focus on sales. The sales team's going to meet and get together every single week. We're going to talk about it. We're going to measure it, and we're going to inspect what we expect. And then we're just going to like push this thing out. And you can see on our graph, it's like it just goes from like this to like this in quarter three when we started doing that. And we now have exceeded our sales goal for the year, and we're not to the end of the year yet. So like it works. This stuff actually works. And yeah, just make sure you're talking about it. Make sure that it's front of mind for everyone, and they see that it's getting measured.
Attaboy. Yeah. I just watched a great video. I watch a lot of YouTube videos and channels on landscaping and snow removal, especially this time of year. Excellent video from Jonathan Potoshnik, 5 for 5. One of my, he used
5
to be
for 50.
5 for 50, sorry. He used to be one of my favorite YouTubers, Lawn Care Millionaire, when I was starting out, and inspired me a ton. And he just had a excellent video to expand on kind of the difference between your sales goal and when you're going to actually realize that revenue. So, you know, I'm assuming ACA follows a calendar year for fiscal, and Jason just blew his sales out of the water. But a lot of that revenue, it's not like everybody just pays him up front, right? So now he's going to maybe start some of these contracts in November or December or something for winter and realize a lot of that income next summer. So I highly recommend checking out that video on 5 for 50 and subscribing to that channel. It's he lays it out a lot better. He's a lot more prepared than we are with spreadsheets and things on the screen and showing you. But it just shows you, like, it backs into the numbers even more. It's like, if you need to realize this many dollars, this is actually how many contracts and leads and so on that you need.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why I said like we hit our sales goal. That's the number one topic of conversation in our leadership meetings right now is like, cool, sales team like did their thing and hit their sales goal, but they did it too late. They waited till quarter three. So like our recognized revenue on our P&L at the end of the year is going to fall short of what our projected was because we didn't get the bulk of our sales until Q3, and we won't recognize a lot of that revenue until after the year closes. So.
Right. Yeah, you sell a 2-month or a 12-month contract, but you only have 2 months left in the year or whatever it might be. So anyway, it's getting late in the night to talk all these numbers. I'm losing it.
I know. Well, we can kind of cruise through these last ones. I think we already talked about quite a bit of this, but the last things I would just say are really kind of transition into that like training period, that coaching period, mentorship period, and then just holding accountability and measuring performance, which we just talked about quite a bit, right? So what does that look like for you? Like, you hire someone new, you hire a salesperson, like what does that look like, that onboarding, that training, to get them up to speed?
Yeah, so every company is a bit different, and you can mix sales into, you can make them like hybrid roles, like maybe your, whatever you call them, your supervisor, your account manager, they might oversee some production and they might do some sales. And, you might just have a straight up 100% commission salesperson, and there's a million different ways to do it. Right. What we did was we made a hybrid role. So you sell it and then you oversee the production of it. And you might have supervisors and you have great crew leaders and things to oversee as well. But the way that we started was we first built that formula that I talked about earlier. So we had all those line items and the hourly rates and the production rates and all those things. And we showed our managers how it worked. It's, you know, it's fairly simple, how to measure the site. And then I reviewed every one. And so basically they and our contract size is different than single family homes. We're talking about condo contracts. They're, 50 to 100 grand a year kind of thing. There's a lot fewer of them to build a good sized business than if you're doing single family homes for 150 to 300 bucks a month or whatever, right? Where you just, like, the owner may not be able to sit there and review every single thing, because the speed to get those quotes out is going to just be terrible. If he has 3 people sending him 100 leads or 100 quotes a day to review or something. So in my case, for larger contracts, I would review every one, and then I would make a Loom video, not Zoom, but a Loom video. And it's just a screen recording. You could do it in person if you want, it doesn't matter. But I would make a screen recording. I would go through the map and I would say, okay, it looks like, the map is good, or we have to fix this up. It looks like you're a bit short on your cut hours, and a bit low on this, a bit high on this. And I was the feedback loop for it, right? So if the same person that's estimating and doing the sales always was, say, struggling with getting the the spring cleanup times correct, then okay, we got to work on that specifically. And it's a bit of a fail-safe, as well. And then I'd send it back to them. I'd say, hey, it looks great, pricing looks good, send it off to the customer. And after a pretty short amount of time, they just get really good. They probably get a little bit sick of adding delay in by having to send it to me to review. And then eventually they can kind of review one another's quotes, and it speeds up over time. But that's how I would recommend starting off, is just build it, get them to do it, you review it, give it back to them to send off, and away you go.
Yeah, great. I love that. What I like about that too is it creates a expected channel for feedback. So like they don't have to keep coming to you over and over again with every little question. They know they just got to put the proposal together, send it off to you, and then they're going to get their feedback, rather than like every time I'm pricing cut and clean, sending a question to you and saying like, "Hey, I'm not quite sure." Like, just put it together, send it to Brandon. He's going to review it.
Exactly.
He'll give me the feedback. Yeah, cool.
Exactly. One more quick thing, like we broke up the stages of the process, and there's a couple different people involved.
Mhm.
So you spoke to the stages and sales process a little bit, and I think we might have talked about this in another episode, but it's basically like a lead comes in, and it's got to be what you call qualified in or out. That's the very first thing that happens. Is this even a job we would want? And the person that does that is different than the person that estimates and sells it in my company.
Yes.
And then you might have somebody else that runs the numbers for the estimate, and then somebody else that sends it and shakes the hand. It's kind of like you go to a car dealership, and the car salesman's just like the charming guy that can sell stuff, but they might not be the one to do the math and figure out the financing. That's why there's like the finance guy you talk to, right? So in our company, a lead comes in, our ops manager qualifies it in or out. Basically, she's just looking at, is this an ideal customer for us? We only do condos. This is commercial? No. This is residential? No. This is out of our area? No. Or this is a great contract. It's next door to our other one, qualified in. And from there, we have an admin person, send off the request for a map. And then from there, the manager that ultimately quotes it, gets me to review it, and sends it, takes over. So you can break things up, and it does take a bit of back and forth before you get it right, and before you're just costing yourself time because it is important to, you get the lead. How quickly do you turn the bid around?
But honestly, breaking it up like that, because we do a very similar thing to you. We break it up by task. So the only difference really is that our customer service reps, our CSRs, are the ones who do the initial qualification. So they're trained to do the qualification. It doesn't even hit the sale team's plate unless they qualify it, and then that creates a deal. Our virtual assistants, I don't even like calling her that because she's such a key part of our team. But
Because she's a real person, she's not virtual.
Yeah, exactly. She handles the discovery stage, so she does the map generation and inputs the measurements into our CRM, and then it goes off into pricing. The salesperson handles the pricing, that sort of stuff. The thing that I would say about that, though, is when you do split it up between different roles like that, you can actually gain speed from that. You certainly could slow it down, but you can gain speed from that. Like so I still do a lot of the pricing for our commercial contracts. And what's cool about that is like I can come in and she's already hammered out like measurements and everything else for like 30 properties. And then I can just bust through and push those into our pricing calculators, review them, make sure they're good. And then I move into the next stage, which is the actual proposal creation. Now that she has the pricing and everything, she puts together the document, right? And then I do one final look at the document. So what's cool about that is like she can be working on something while I'm working on something, and then I hand it back off to her and I continue working on things. So you can actually gain speed by doing that as well.
Right.
Which I think is cool.
Nice. Well, that was a lot.
It was a lot.
Probably overwhelming.
Yeah, I think we got all the major points though.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of those that, covering them at a high level is not really doing them justice.
Right.
So yeah, if you ever want to see just like a sidecar episode just on qualifying deals or figuring out ideal customers or anything like that, throw it in the comments and I'm sure we'd be happy to yammer on about any of those things for a bit.
For sure. The other thing I'll say is I think that we just really focused a lot on like kind of from the perspective of contract sales in this conversation. There's like a whole other episode on enhancement sales and those sorts of things. And maybe someday, I know it certainly wouldn't be you or I that would be the subject matter expert on this, but maybe we can get someone who just crushes at design build and have them come in and talk about their sales process. Because I would learn a lot from that. I certainly do not have any of the answers as it relates to design build.
Me too.
Cool. Well, I think this is good. Just to recap very quickly, kind of the steps that we talked about are just, dialing in and systemizing your estimating process first, then your sales process as a whole, building that supporting collateral, setting goals and expectations for whoever it is that you're handing this off to, and then making sure that they have a program to be trained and mentored and supported and coached throughout that process. And then, of course, holding them accountable, talking about it on a regular frequency with your team.
Totally.
Awesome. Before we close here, what's your final verdict on that beer? That was a new one for you, right?
That was very good. Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I like it quite a bit. Papa Bear Prairie Ale, Half Hitch Brewing. So yeah, I'd highly recommend. I would say.
Same. Mine too. This is a limited release. It's one of their specialty releases, but I would definitely recommend checking it out. Very festive. Chestnut Praline Imperial Ale.
I think part of it is that it's just been a bit of a long day, so this beer tastes extra good.
Yeah.
So it might be skewed. Every time we rate them, it could be a bit skewed by how tough the day was.
Fair. That's a fair point.
Anyway.
Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and close out here. Last call. First of all, cheers, Brandon.
Cheers, Jay.
Cheers to all of you. Please like, comment, and share. We are trying to grow this thing. We want to reach as many people as possible. Comment and let us know what you were drinking as you listen to the episode. And as always, let us know any topics you want to hear, anything like that. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been another episode of The Beer Garden. And to all of you, Cheers and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.